So many of those rural counties that went for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton last election cycle this time switched to supporting Joe Biden instead.
So why is that? There's also concern about some Nebraskans. Their vote might even get overshadowed with the coronavirus chaos, just as other states are rescheduling their primaries. So the chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party, Jane Kleeb, she joins us now via Skype for insights. Jane, welcome back to Rising. It's great to see you.
Always good to see you guys.
Absolutely. Jane, tell us a little bit about why you think that rural voters changed a little bit about their voting pattern here in the 2020 primary relative to the 2016 one.
So I think the problem that Senator Sanders is facing is that you can't win an election with one slice of the electorate. And while he has broadened his coalition of all branches of the working class voters, what he hasn't done is bring in moderate and conservative voters in order to start winning in states. And so rural voters are no different than urban voters. When they start to see somebody winning, they want to be on the side of a winner.
And Jane, what do you think, where did that disconnect come in? Do you think there were issues that the senator could have focused on differently? Were there concerns that weren't addressed? Or was it just, as you said, sort of, they want to be on the winning team? There was a real coalescing around Joe Biden. Essentially, all the establishment figures threw in behind him. The media threw in behind him and said, this is the guy, this is the person to beat Donald Trump. Was there something different going on with rural voters?
So rural voters right now are facing what they have for the past decade, that the economy in rural communities is declining. Rural hospitals are closing, schools are closing. You have the ag economy that's getting hurt with climate change induced flooding and droughts. So what you didn't see the Senator Sanders team, and quite frankly, Joe Biden didn't do this either, or any of the other candidates for that matter. In Iowa, they did. But in any of the other states, they did not have a real rural strategy with actual campaign folks on the ground in these rural communities, connecting with voters on a one-on-one basis. And so a lot of the rallies and big events were happening in the cities. And so Iowa, you saw Senator Sanders do really well with rural communities because they were targeting and talking to rural voters. And this is my constant message to candidates is you can't expect a voter to come to your side because they agree with you on the issues. You actually have to make sure that they feel like they're being heard and that their issues are being not only targeted in your white papers, obviously that's important and all the candidates have a rural platform, but that you actually have campaign staff and infrastructure in those communities.
So, Jane, this is the interesting part, though, because Joe Biden hasn't necessarily been out there talking about this. He hasn't really targeted, any group, frankly, and had, up until this moment, very sparse campaign resources, and yet he was winning them. What do you owe that phenomenon to?
So for me, I had this moment. I've been to all the primary states, the early primary states. And for me, a moment with a older African-American woman in South Carolina just crystallized everything. I asked her who she was going to vote for, and she said she was going to vote for Vice President Biden. She then told me that Senator Sanders had her heart, but her loyalty was owed to Vice President Biden. And she went on to describe how Biden had for a long time been there for Democrats, and that while she agreed with everything that Senator Sanders was saying on the big issues, including Medicare for all, she felt like she owed her vote to Vice President Biden. And I think that is true for a lot of the Democratic base. They've seen Biden throughout the years and clearly have disagreed with him on issues, but feel a sense of loyalty to him. And I think right now, when everybody, especially now with the coronavirus, with everybody terrified that President Trump is lying every minute of the day and they just need some normalcy and safety in their lives. Biden is that loyal, comfortable politician.
Yeah, and yet, bizarrely, we really haven't seen him since, at all this week. In a moment of national crisis, the likes of which we've certainly never seen in our lifetimes. I think you'd have to go back many generations to see something that is remotely similar to what's unfolding. And the essentially presumptive Democratic nominee has essentially vanished.
It's a big problem. I don't know what is going on in the strategic thinking of Vice President Biden's team, but I want to see him as a party chair. I also want to see more of Senator Sanders. I know he did an amazing live stream that had millions of folks on there where he was connecting with people and making people feel more secure about the coronavirus and things that he's going to be doing in the Senate. But I want to see Vice President Biden. I want to see him command the room like Cuomo and Gavin Newsom are.
So let me also ask you, Jane, just generally about how rural communities are dealing with the crisis right now. We focus a lot about small businesses and much of what's happening, but we also haven't talked about farmers and the other neglected parts of our economy. What is going on there right now, and what are the downstream effects on rural industries?
So right now, our rural hospital in Hastings, they have 14 days of supply. So I just want to say that right off the bat, because even in our state, there's a lot of focus on getting supplies to Omaha and Lincoln, our big cities. But our rural communities, we have maybe 15, 20 open beds at the moment. And so if the coronavirus starts to hit us hard, which we're all expecting it to, there is no plan B and C for us in rural communities. So I just want to put that out there. For farmers, they're worried about the supply chain. So, of course, people are still continuing to buy groceries during this time. But my husband's in the cattle business, and they can't get their product overseas, which is one of their main supplies and where they sell a lot of their beef. And now farmers are also worrying about, when it comes time for planting and harvesting, are the workers going to be there? About 40% of the workers in agriculture are undocumented immigrants. That's just the reality that a lot of people don't like to talk about. And if the coronavirus is continuing to impact all communities, especially poor communities who can't get access to healthcare, they're not going to have the workforce to actually grow the food that we then have in the grocery stores.
Which is, of course, then going to create issues for all of us if that food isn't available. We already see the shortages, with our own eyes on the grocery store shelves.
Appreciate you joining us, Jane. Thanks very much.
Great to see you, Jane. And we're going to have more Rising for you after this.